Hello again, everybody. Cal Ewing here, and I am extremely pumped today to be talking about turnkey investment properties. And I have brought on a really awesome guest that I met a couple years back, who is a Calgarian that decided he had enough of winter and decided to move down to sunny California and create his own real estate empire, just like a lot of us aspire to do. And Marco Santarelli he's the CEO of Norada Real Estate Investments. He's here with us today. Marco, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me on, Cal. I'm excited to be here, and hopefully we can educate and share a lot of great information with your audience.
Yeah, well, as you know, I guess our main audience is primarily Canadians who have at least some interest in investing south of the border. Or they've already started, but they're looking for ways to improve their strategies and grow their portfolios and things like that. And I know with a lot of you that are watching, you're very busy, you've got careers, and you'd like to acquire more cash flowing properties, but maybe you don't have the time or the knowledge, or you're growing slower than you'd like. And I know there's many people out there that are looking for an easy solution, but also a really solid investment. And this is why, Marco, I wanted you to come and talk, because this is exactly what your company does, right? Tell us about it.
Yeah, exactly. So, short answer to your question is we freely, meaning we don't charge for our services, help investors and those people who want to be investors to educate themselves and invest in markets that make sense. Because for many of us, and those who are listening to this will know who they are, live in markets that are overpriced or expensive, and the numbers don't make sense. The properties are too expensive. They're probably overpriced. They don't cash flow well. They don't provide good rates of return. So what do? Unfortunately, the so-called gurus out there have led us to believe that in order for us to invest, we need to invest within a 1 or 2 hour radius of where we live. Well, that's flawed. That's flawed advice, because for many of us, we live in very expensive markets, be it Toronto, Vancouver, parts of Calgary, Montreal. I mean, the markets are endless. San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York. You just can't do that. The other thing too is these so-called gurus that are telling you to invest within a 1 or 2 hour radius of where you live are often talking about a strategy where you're buying and fixing and then holding, or maybe buying, fixing, and flipping. And that, to me, that's not actually investing. You're creating chunks of cash instead of creating streams of cash. So to properly invest, you got to be market agnostic. And this is, one of the philosophies of our company, and one I adopted over 16 years ago when I started investing 3,000 miles away, living in Southern California and investing in places like Florida, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio. And to this day, there are still properties that I had purchased back then, 15 years ago, that I still have not seen with my own eyes. And I'm able to do that because I have the right team in place. And this is just one of the things that we teach and we help people to understand. So the point of it all is that you may not be in a market that makes sense today in terms of income or cash flow or rates of return, but that shouldn't stop you, because you need to be market agnostic. And I'll give you a quick example, and then I'll turn the mic over back to you.
Oh, I like it.
So, I use Coca-Cola as the example. If I were an equities investor and I wanted to invest in the stock market, be it the TSE or the New York Stock Exchange, whatever, and I did all my due diligence research, and I found that Coca-Cola was the number one best company to be investing in right now today, and I just have to invest in that company. If I wasn't agnostic to the fact that I could live anywhere in the world and invest in that stock, I would basically shackle myself to the fact that I couldn't invest in Coca-Cola because I didn't live in Atlanta, Georgia, where Coca-Cola was headquartered. How ridiculous is that? So it's the same thing with real estate. You don't need to live in Atlanta to invest in Atlanta. You don't need to live in Calgary to invest in Calgary. I can invest in Calgary here from Southern California if I wanted to. So by disconnecting yourself from these myths about investing, and realize that we have local real estate markets peppered all over Canada and the United States, you could literally invest anywhere and live anywhere.
Okay, well, that makes so much sense. And I meet a lot of people that are, I guess you say they're not agnostic to it, and we have these discussions. They're like, well, why would you take that risk to invest somewhere so far away where you can't manage your properties, you can't see them, et cetera, et cetera. Yet a lot of these people aren't cash flowing. They're feeding their investments, hoping that they're going to ride another wave of appreciation. And they just think that's the only way to do it. So how can someone...
Can I correct you on something,
Yes.
Cal?
Sure.
Okay, so the people that just listened to what you said heard two things. They heard that you said, should I take on, or why would I take on the risk of investing in a different market, another market elsewhere? Well, first of all, you have to understand that you may be taking on less of a risk by investing in another market than in the market where you live, as being an expensive or overpriced market where property values are high, and you have a greater tendency for those values to come down in the foreseeable future, just because land values are so overpriced. So you may actually be taking on less risk investing in a different market where the numbers make sense and it's got better stability, a greater GDP, greater broad economy. What was the other thing you said? There's a perceived risk, if you will, and I say risk in quotes, because you're not there. And that's just a myth. It's a fear that people just need to overcome, because the reality is unless you are a professional property manager yourself and you know exactly how to manage a property, how to lease it, how to screen tenants, how to communicate with prospective tenants, you know the tenant landlord laws, and you want to be an active investor and invest your time in managing your properties. If you want to do all that, which most people don't, then why would you? You would hire a professional full-service management company to manage your portfolio. So if you're going to do that in your local market, there's no reason why you can't do exactly the same thing in the market that's 100 miles away or 1,000 miles away. It makes no difference. So if you understand that, then you realize that it doesn't matter where you live and it doesn't matter where you invest, as long as everything is objective and rational in terms of its location, the market health, characteristics, location, property type, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Something that is not complicated at all. We've been doing it for 15 plus years now, and we teach this every day, and we hold the investor's hand and walk them through this whole process every single day. But there's no, I want to make sure that your listeners understand that there's sometimes less risk in investing in better markets than where you live. So I don't want people to think that it's increasing the risk. It's not. In many cases, it's decreasing the risk.
Yeah, and well, I agree. And I mean, I'm investing in Houston from Calgary too, so I completely agree with that. What about the cross-border thing? Because I know most of the people that are watching this are probably less afraid of that, but there is a lot of, I think, fear that's not really viable when it comes to imagining themselves investing in the States. And since you are Canadian, you might understand that more than someone else that's just been doing business in the US from day one.
Yeah.
Is there any different risk in your opinion?
No, because regardless of where you live, I mean, we're going to look at this in two ways. We're going to look at this from an asset protection perspective and a tax perspective. Yeah. Let's start with the tax perspective. I'm not a CPA or a tax advisor, and I can't give you tax advice here.
We've got some other videos with people that can, so it's part of this. So.
Yeah, and we work with people that do that. So when we have clients that come in from Canada, the UK, Australia, we put them in touch with these tax advisors that understand cross-border tax law, and they know how to help you set up your entity in Canada so it plugs into your title holding entity in the US, and that way you're not double taxed. It's the income just flows straight through, and then you're only taxed as you're supposed to be taxed in Canada. And that's it. I mean, that's the long and the short of it.
Yeah.
What's that?
Once you've got that figured out, there's no real difference.
There isn't. It's just how you set up your entities, your structure, because there's an optimal way to do it. So that way your revenue, your income flows straight through, and it shows up as the proper type of income in Canada. So you're taxed accordingly. So it doesn't matter whether you have properties in the US, Canada, or elsewhere. From an asset protection perspective, that doesn't change regardless of where you live. There's different ways to do it. There's only a few ways to do it, and there's only a few ways to do it right. But generally speaking, and again, I'm not an attorney, so this is not legal advice, but as a general rule of thumb, you don't want to hold your property in your own personal name. You want to put it in a title holding entity. And the most popular and common entity in the United States is what we call an LLC. It's kind of like the LTD, the limited company in Canada. An LLC is a limited liability company, and you can set it up as a pass-through entity, so any revenue or income generated goes straight through. That entity is not taxed. In fact, it doesn't even file a tax return. You just file one form every year just to state, that it's alive and what it's doing. But the revenue that's in that entity, which means the properties that are in that entity, just flow straight up to your limited partnership or whatever you have set up in Canada. But the nice thing about that is it's an asset protection tool. It basically separates you from the property and holds the title in the entity. So it's the old saying, own nothing but control everything. This is exactly how you own everything, and you own nothing and you control everything.
Yeah. Well, let's back up a little bit and just talk about turnkey real estate providers like yourself. Like, what is turnkey? What does that actually mean? And what are you offering to investors?
So the term turnkey, unfortunately, has been thrown around, and there's no formal definition of it. It means different things to different people. I am actually one of the people 15 plus years ago that started marketing that phrase turnkey very hard. I marketed the crap out of it. And so I helped put it more on the map than what it was back then, because it really wasn't a common phrase back then. Mm-hmm. And now everybody uses that term. The important thing to differentiate here is that turnkey is not the same as rent ready. You can go on to the MLS or find for sale by owners or whatever and find something that's in relatively good condition. Maybe there's no maintenance required today, but there are some deferred maintenance items. But it's leased and it's cash flowing. That's a rent ready property. But by our definition, that's not turnkey. You talk to different people and different companies and you get a different definition of turnkey. Here's our definition of turnkey. I like to use this as the benchmark. So I set the bar nice and high to define what it means. So essentially for us, a turnkey investment, or specifically a turnkey investment property, would be an investment that's in a good market. We can define what all that means, but in a good market, in a good neighborhood, in new or like new condition. It's cash flow positive, tenant occupied, professionally managed with local full service property management, and there's no deferred maintenance on that. Wow. And that's why we like both new construction and newly renovated homes, because the newly renovated homes, which make up about 80% of the properties that our clients purchase through us and our network, are in like new condition. The mechanicals have been replaced, so it's relatively new. When I say relatively, I mean there are metrics for the roof and the HVAC system in terms of the minimum number of years of serviceable life. But generally speaking, it's a new roof, new HVAC, new hot water tank, sometimes new electrical and sometimes new plumbing. Often the fixtures like the toilets, the vanities and whatnot are replaced as well. And then the rest of it is cosmetic in a sense, because when you put in cabinets, flooring, paint, new baseboard, new light switches, new lighting, you essentially have more or less a new home. The only thing that stayed the same is the frame and foundation. And we check the foundation, or at least our teams check the foundation to make sure there's no issues there. So if all those boxes are checked, that's a turnkey investment for us.
Mm-hmm. So your investors are buying everything done. It's just you're basically collecting cash flow from that point.
Well, you are as an investor, right?
Yeah.
We don't partner with our clients. Yeah. We're 100% owner, and 100% of all the benefits go straight to you as the investor. We do syndications, but these are not syndications. The turnkey investment properties we're talking about are entirely yours.
Yeah. So a lot of people might be thinking, well, how do you find a new or nearly new home that's cash flowing and all the numbers actually make sense? So where are you finding these kind of deals? Because I know a lot of people can't find that kind of a rental property deal in their own market.
Well, let's talk about the U.S. for a moment, not Canada, just because I can give you some better numbers.
Yeah.
The U.S. is made up of over 400 MSAs, or metropolitan statistical areas. Canada's broken up in the same way. You have your major metropolitan areas, and you have all your MSAs peppered throughout the country. So the fact is we have a big country. We both have big countries with lots of local independent markets that work independently of each other. So what happens in San Diego is different than what happens in, let's say, Indianapolis, Indiana, which is different than what happens in Chicago, Illinois, which is different than what happens in Windsor, Ontario. So all real estate is local. So it all starts with a top-down approach. You start with the top being the market. You identify the markets that make sense. They have a healthy housing market. They have a good balance between supply and demand. The numbers make sense. It's not overpriced or inflated. In other words, it's not become a bubble market. You have to have the right team of people there. Access to inventory. If there's no inventory, you can have the best market in the country, but you're not going to get anything out of it. So you have to have access to investable inventory. We look for jobs and job growth. Those are all the things, the factors that happen at that top level of that funnel. Then once you've identified the right market and you're able to get the inventory, then you start looking at submarkets and neighborhoods within that market. Now we're in 22 markets right now in the U.S., from Chicago, Illinois on the north side, through the Midwest, throughout the Southeast, parts of Florida, and peppered in the Northeast, like Cleveland and Cincinnati. Not always, it just depends if we have inventory there or not, but we're in those markets actively, but we're in and out depending on whether we have inventory or not. Because sometimes inventory is a challenge, and we have a shortage of inventory in this country, as I believe you do in Canada as well. So sometimes, that inventory is just not there. It comes in waves. So market first, neighborhood second, then you start looking at the properties, or we start looking at the properties. And this is something you could duplicate yourself as well as an investor. But when you start looking at the properties after you've identified everything else, then you start analyzing the condition of the property, its location, specific location, street and location within a neighborhood, the numbers, what are the income and all the expenses, and make sure you're doing that right. You're budgeting for vacancy, you're budgeting for maintenance and repairs. So you want a true net cash flow number when you look at that. And everything I'm describing to you, by the way, is everything that we have on our website. It's available, open to the public. And when you work with an investment counselor, we dig deeper into those weeds to help, answer questions and identify properties and do the inspections and due diligence. But this is the general process. It's a top-down approach. Once you've done all that, you've identified, that one property or those two properties that make the most sense for you, and you like them and you want to add them to your investment portfolio, then you go through the next phase of that process, which is put it under contract, start working on your financing, and do your inspections, go into escrow, and then close within usually 35 to 45 days. You close on the property, take title, and now it's yours, and the cash flow goes to you instead of, the previous owner.
Okay. So are your investors that are buying turnkey properties, are they buying the property directly from the previous homeowner, or is your company or partners buying it and then they're buying it from you? How does that transaction work?
It's a direct relationship. So you, as our client, we're working with you, every day in one hand, if you will, to use an analogy. In the other hand, we have that inventory, the properties. Now, we don't have title. We don't hold title because it's our partners on the ground that hold title. Mm-hmm. So as we were talking about before offline, the partner relationships that we have, that we've built on the ground, basically they're our boots on the ground. They're the ones who are building those properties, or they're acquiring those properties and fixing them up and doing everything we just talked about 2 minutes ago in terms of making them a turnkey property investment. Once they're ready, they hand them over to us. Now we have that inventory available for our clients to purchase, to invest in. So once we have that inventory, we provide that education and the matchmaking, if you will, between the investor and their goals and the markets in those properties, and then we make that transaction happen. So there's a lot of things that go on throughout that process, as I've just been talking about here in the last 4 minutes. Mm-hmm. But having the right team of people is critically important, as I was mentioning before. Having the right people on the ground, the boots on the ground, in terms of acquisition, inspections, title companies and attorneys as needed, property management, home builders, and property rehabbers. Those are the teams that we've put together on the ground in each of these markets.
Okay. So what kind of due diligence do you recommend an investor do when they're looking at these properties? Like, obviously you guys have a lot of this, all of it handled, but if I'm brand new, what should I be looking at, whether I'm working with your company or another turnkey company? What should I be looking at to make sure that I'm in a good investment?
So by the time you're looking at specific properties, you've already gone through the process with our investment counselors to understand who you are and what you're trying to do from an investment perspective. So at that point, you've identified the market and the types of neighborhoods within that market that are going to meet your investment criteria, because for some people, they might want to be in A- type neighborhoods, premium areas, stronger growth potential, not as attractive or sexy in terms of the cash on cash returns. Others might want to be in, let's say, BB- type neighborhoods, stronger cash flows, better looking numbers. They look sexier on paper. Still good growth, probably keep up with the pace of inflation, but they're not strong growth markets, meaning that they are cash flow markets. They're what I refer to as a boring market. Boring markets are good. They will allow you to build a portfolio with strong cash flow and keep up with inflation, or maybe beat inflation, but without being too crazy and creating a bubble market in these types of markets. So once you've identified all that, now you're looking at the property. This is when you do the due diligence on the property. So when you've asked all the questions you need and gotten all the information you need based on those properties you like that you've put on your short list, that might be talking to our team, or our team on the ground, our provider, what I call boots on the ground, looking at the scope of work. Most investors don't request that, but if that's just something you want to do, you could look at the scope of work and see what's been done. Once you've really made that decision and put it under contract, then you order a home inspection. We insist. In fact, we won't work with a client unless they do a home inspection. So we want you to have a third-party home inspector do a full home inspection on the property, so from top to bottom. If there are any red flags that show up, which is very rare, but if anything comes up, then we look deeper into it. We bring in a specialist on the outside to look into it, because maybe the inspector said, well, I think I saw something in the foundation, but I'm not sure. I would get in a professional. Same thing with the roof. Then you bring in a different inspector that focuses on nothing but the foundation or nothing but roofs. That doesn't happen very often. If things don't check out with an inspection, which is, again, very rare, you can just cancel the contract and move on to a different property. We'll just pick a different one. 99% of the time, though, properties inspect very well. I classify things that come up on inspection as must be done, should be done, could be done. There's very, very rarely are there things that are must be done items. Those are the red flag type stuff. You'll often have a handful of should be done things. Those are debatable and questionable. Often what we're going to consider, does it have anything to do with safety concerns? Or something that is truly a deferred maintenance item, then that's a point of discussion, and we'll resolve that, figure that out. But you'll always get a laundry list of could be done items on an inspection. Otherwise, you're going to have a blank inspection.
Yeah.
And then you work with your mortgage broker or lender. We have a whole bunch of them to work with, both for U.S. residents as well as international residents like Canadians. So there is financing options available for Canadians.
Right.
Slightly different terms, but still available. And that's it. So, that process takes about 1 to 2 weeks. But after that, it's a waiting game. It's really just waiting for the lender to process and underwrite the deal and close escrow.
Okay. What about tenants? Do you guys provide background, like the due diligence that you put forth as far as criminal checks, all the background checks? Do you provide that? Is it something your clients usually request, or?
Those are available. Clients don't normally normally don't request those items, but they are available through the local property management managing that property. So sometimes there's sensitive information. If you don't technically own the property yet, they may not provide you some of that stuff because it will have sensitive personal information on it. And that's only for the landlord, the person who is contractually tied to that property for management, and that wouldn't be obviously our client or you at that point in time. Right. But a conversation with the property manager, they're happy to talk about it, and reveal whatever you need to know. But yes, they do background checks, they do credit checks, they do they validate income or verify income, employment. There's a short laundry list of things that they check to qualify and screen tenants. Usually they look for about 3 times gross income based on rent. So, if it's $1,000 a month rental, they're looking at $3,000 or $3,500 a month gross income on that person.
Okay. And what kind of returns do people expect to get? I know, I'm sure it varies, like you were saying, because there's different markets that you're buying in, A minuses and Bs, but.
Well, yeah, I mean, it depends on how you're defining a return. You know, different investors will call it different things. In terms of cap rates, I'll kind of give you a spread here. In terms of cap rates are going to vary depending on the market and the neighborhood. The neighborhood is a big influencer on the types of returns you can get from a property.
Yeah.
But these are just broad rules of thumb or broad strokes, because I'm looking at, 22 different markets here right now and to answer this question.
Yeah.
But you're going to see cap rates depending on market and neighborhood vary from about 6% to as high as 10%. That's a broad range. When you add leverage, at least for us, we can go up to 80% financing, so 20% down. It's a little different as a foreign national. So as a Canadian, the highest I've seen is 75% loan to value, so 25% down, which is still fantastic. But different lenders will provide you different terms. So it could be 65, 70, 75% loan to value. At that point, you're looking at a cash on cash return, somewhere in the, I'd say 8 to 13, 14% cash on cash, which is still very, very attractive.
Yeah.
Probably the average is around 9, 10%, I would say. Again, it's really specific and dependent on the property. But when you look at the overall rate of return, and this is the big and beautiful thing with real estate, Cal, is when you factor in all the benefits of real estate, your total ROI, your total return, is often in the 30% range and sometimes the 40% range. We have a very detailed cash flow analysis tool on our website. Every single property has an orange button. When you click on it, it pops up a light box window on your screen and shows you, like a spreadsheet, a breakdown by year of income, expenses, and the financial performance of that property. So you will see everything from cap rate to total ROI and even internal rate of return. So real estate is a sexy investment when you consider what it is capable of doing in terms of leveraged returns and equity growth and tax benefits over time.
Absolutely. So I'm sure you do coach your investors as far as like how much they should be keeping for maintenance, repairs, how much they should be factoring in for vacancies and things like that. Because I know a lot of people that are new, they might not even know to do that or how much to put aside, things like that. So do they get coached as they go through the process if they need it?
Yeah. I mean, our investment counselors that are quote unquote coaching, basically counseling or working with investors, are going to provide them that type of information. Again, as a general rule of thumb, we suggest you budget 5% for vacancy and 5% for maintenance and repairs. You can increase, if you're conservative, bump that up. You can make it 6, 7, 8%. If you're in lower grade neighborhoods, like if you start to get into like the CC plus type neighborhoods, then I would bump that up as well, including your vacancy allowance, because you may see higher turnovers, as in like a tenant might stay 1 to 2 years versus 3 to 4 in a better quality neighborhood. So you want to bump those numbers up a little bit. But yeah, you should have those. If you want to measure true net cash flows, even though you're not paying vacancy today, you're not paying for maintenance and repairs today, you want to budget for that stuff, because over the course of a year or 2 years, those expenses will come up, and now you've effectively budgeted for it and expected it, and now you have the funds in your operating account to cover that repair or that turnover. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of when, not if, and you just have to make sure that you've got it factored in there.
Yeah. And that's the benefit of having you guys go in there and do all the major repairs and updates first, as far as the big capital expenditures like roof, foundation, water heater, HVAC, because those are the things that'll hurt you if you don't plan. And I know a lot of people that buy homes that have deferred maintenance as rentals, thinking, oh, well, we should be okay for a few years. And then, 6 months later, they have to, replace the roof, or because the storm comes. Well, I guess you have insurance, but a big ticket item that you're not factoring in comes way sooner than you expect. And then you're scrambling to figure out how you're going to pay for it. So I like the idea of coming in with a home that's already taken care of. You're starting to put a little bit aside every month so that, way down the line, those things happen and you've got it covered. Makes so much
Yeah, those major repair items, the big capital expenditures, those certainly you want to save up for, and that could be part of your maintenance and repair budgeting, because you're not going to spend that every year, but you do want to have. Here's my rule of thumb: it's to put away 3 to 4 months of gross rent per property in the beginning. So if you have $100,000 property, it rents for $1,000 a month. And I know for people listening to this in Vancouver and Toronto, they're wondering what is that, a garage?
Yeah.
The reality is you can buy nice 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes in the Midwest and in many parts of the U.S. For $100,000 to $150,000. And in fact, the bulk of what we sell is between $100,000 and $150,000. The median being about $120,000, and that's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. And it's typically between 1,200 and 1,800 square feet. So that's a pretty nice house. But here's the thing. When it comes to capital expenditures, roofs you can expect, depending on where it's located in the country and what type of roof, you can expect a roof to last 15 to 20 years or more. Hot water tank, depending on the quality of it, 10, 15, and 20 years, depending on the type. And HVAC systems typically will last 20 plus years. There may be service requirements and you want to change the filter every year and that kind of stuff, but they last, 15, 20 years. Beyond that, there's really not too much left in terms of mechanicals, because as long as it's got copper wiring, the electrical will be fine. Sometimes you have an issue with copper pipe, but very rare. And if it does happen, it's just a matter of, replacing a line. You don't have to strip the house down or anything. So, we're talking about sticks and bricks. There's, a property's not hard. A house, single family home is not hard to understand. There's not too many parts to it.
But that's the beauty of this type of investment, is that people understand houses because we all live in houses. Whereas like if you're investing in some kind of stock or something that you really don't understand the industry, we all live in houses. We all know what kind of repairs need to be done to your house, whether you rent or own. And so it's just easy to get your head around and make smarter decisions, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree.
Awesome. So what's the best way for people to find out more about your company, Marco, and get in contact with you? Because I know you said you got a lot of content on your website.
Yeah, we post a ton of content on both of our websites. There's 2 websites. The property site is Norada Real Estate, Norada, noradarealestate.com. And then the system
image on the bottom here too, so you can click on it.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Thank you. The related or sister website is passiverealestateinvesting.com. And Passive Real Estate Investing, as you probably know, I think is the name of my podcast, and that's the home of my podcast. So passiverealestateinvesting.com has a bunch of free information, and it links back to the other site. So
yeah, I was just going to ask about the podcast. You're still doing that?
Yeah, going on 4 years next month. Awesome. So yeah, no, I enjoy doing it. It's a lot of work because, I put a lot of time into it, put out a lot of good quality content. No, we put out a lot of stuff, so it's good. We like it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, man, I know you're a busy guy. You said you're working on expanding the company even more, so I won't take up too much of it, but I really appreciate all your time and expertise. And do you ever end up in Calgary very often? I know you have family still here.
Yeah, I used to come up 4 times a year, and then we scaled that back to 3 times a year. And then for the most part, it's been twice a year, although we missed out this Christmas. So we had some stuff going on. We couldn't make it up there, unfortunately, and that's why I didn't get a chance to see you or anybody else. But yeah, we'll be coming up here this summer for sure.
Okay. Well, when you're here, maybe we can have another event, like a meetup, presentation or something like that, or at least have you on a webinar again, and we can get some
that'd be great.
Q&A and that kind of thing as well. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Look forward to it.
All right, Marco, I appreciate your time.
Hey, my pleasure, Cal. Thanks. I look forward to doing this again.
All right. Sounds good.